Welcome back to the daily Rambam class. We are up to the laws of Chagiga Chapter 2. It's Thursday, so we will begin with a PowerPoint that will give us a little bit of context of where we are up to in the Rambam. We are learning the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, which means second to the Torah. The Rambam gave this name to say that once a person has learned the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, he can then move straight to the Rambam, become Sheni, second to the Torah, which will cover a summary, or not just a summary, not at all a summary, which will cover all of Jewish law as it is extracted from the Talmud and other sources. Mishnah Torah, as we know, has 14 volumes. Baruch Hashem, we are already on volume number 9, which is quite incredible. The last volume or 2 have been relating to temple times. Please God, very soon we'll have a Beis Hamikdash. And those of you that have been joining our daily Rambam class will definitely have an insight over your friends as far as what's going on around you. We first learned all about temple service, Sefer Avodah, and that included offerings that are brought on behalf of the community. In the next volume, which we're learning now, Sefer Korbanos, the book of sacrifices, if I remember correctly, here the Rambam speaks about offerings that are upon the individual. So the Rambam has approximately 1,000 chapters. A chapter a day means it takes close to 3 years to do. And this is a summary of them all. And we are now up to the book of, as I mentioned, Korbanos. It's actually looks like it is the smallest book in the entire Rambam. It's only 45 chapters. Let's open up that particular book. Let's take a look at the book of Korbanos. The Rambam starts each volume with a verse from Tehillim. He started this 9th volume with a pasuk. They're not always from Tehillim, but they're usually from Tehillim. My prayer be established as incense before you, we say to Hashem when we daven. The raising of my hands is a meal offering brought in the afternoon. So when we daven, our davening is in place of the different offerings that we are now learning about. Taking a glance at this 9th volume, the book of Korbanos, there are only 6 subjects. The number of chapters on the right is incorrect. It has not been updated. The total chapters is only 45. We learned about the Korban Pesach, Paschal Lamb. We are now learning about the So the Paschal Lamb, there were 10 chapters on that. We're now learning Chagiga. There are only 3 chapters on that. Next, we'll learn about the firstborn animals. And there are 8 chapters on that. Then we'll learn about offerings brought for mistakes when a person sinned. And there are 15 chapters on that. Fortunately, we make too many mistakes. But fortunately, we have a way to rectify the situation, and we'll learn about that, please God, in a few weeks. Mechusar kapara, offerings that a person would need to bring in order to be able to once again, in order for a person to once again be able to eat the meats of the Beis Hamikdash and to receive complete atonement. And there are 5 chapters of that. And then finally, the laws of Tamura, when a person moved the sanctity from one offering to another, and there are 4 chapters of that. But for today, let's take a look at chapter 1 of Chagiga, celebrating Yom Tov. Let's learn about the offerings that were brought in celebration of Yom Tov. So this particular subject will cover 6 mitzvahs, 4 positive mitzvahs and 2 negative ones. And they are to appear before Hashem, or the divine presence. Yeah, in Hebrew it just says to appear before Hashem, but it means in the base of Mikdash. Number 2, to celebrate the 3 regalim, the 3 pilgrimage festivals of Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos. Number 3, to rejoice on the festivals, lismayach, to be happy. Number 4, not to appear before the divine presence empty-handed. When we come, we should not come without what to give. Number 5, not to abandon the Levi by refraining from making him joyous and giving him his presence of the festival, separate special gifts that would be brought for the Levi. And number 6, to gather the nation on the Sukkot following the sabbatical year. And these 6 mitzvahs will be discussed in the following chapters. This particular year that we're in is a year of Shemitah, which means that this coming Sukkot is actually going to be a Hakal Sukkot, which we'll learn about as well. Please God, if I am not mistaken. Halacha number 1. The Jewish people have been commanded to observe the 3 positive commandments, to observe 3 positive commandments on each of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, on Pesach, on Shavuos, and Sukkot. Everybody remembers Pesach, and Sukkot is also pretty popular, but Shavuos sometimes gets forgotten, but there's 3 of them. And on every one of these 3 festivals, there is a mitzvah in temple times, 3 mitzvahs, to appear before Hashem. As the Torah says, all your males shall appear. To bring a festive offering, as the Torah says, you shall bring a festive offering to Hashem, the Lord, and celebration, as the Torah says, and you shall rejoice in the festivals. So Yom Tov is really, there's a mitzvah to rejoice in Yom Tov, which we'll speak more about as we go through the chapter. The Torah is charged, moving back to the first of the 3 mitzvahs, to appear before Hashem. The Torah is charged to appear before Hashem, mandates that one should appear in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash on the first day of a festival and bring with him a korban oila, burnt offering, and this could either be from a fowl or from an animal. When it comes to the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash on the first day of Yom Tov without bringing a burnt offering, has not only failed to perform a positive command, but has also violated a negative command, which says, you shall not appear in my presence empty-handed. As we just saw, one is not liable for lashes for the violation of this prohibition because he did not perform anything. So although he did something, it's a little tricky. Usually a negative command is Hashem says, don't do something, and then when you do it, you've sinned, and then you would need to bring an offering. But here Hashem says, don't not do something. So since he says, don't not bring an offering, or don't appear empty-handed, which is the absence of an action, so there's no lashes for that. Now, the Torah is charged to bring a festive offering, mandates that one offer a peace offering on the first day of the festival when it comes to appear before the divine presence. So we said there are 3 dimensions, there are 3 mitzvahs over here. The first mitzvah is to appear before Hashem. And the second is to bring a festive offering. And the third is to rejoice. So we're now talking about bringing the festive offering. Sorry. Part of the mitzvah of appearing before Hashem is to bring a burnt offering. Because it says you shouldn't appear empty-handed. So part of not appearing empty-handed means to bring something with you, but even be a bird. And then there's a separate mitzvah, which is to bring a festive offering. And this festive offering is to bring not a burnt offering, not an oila, but a shlabim on the first day of the festival when it comes to appear before the divine presence. It is a known matter that peace offerings are brought only from domesticated animals. Women are not obligated in these 2 mitzvahs of appearing before the divine presence and bringing a festive sacrifice. Obviously, they are welcome, but they are not required. the Torah is charged to celebrate. Now moving on to the third mitzvah. So the first is to appear before Hashem. And that already requires a person to bring at least a bird as a burnt offering. The second is to bring a peace offering, which is an animal. And the third is to celebrate. So the Torah is charged to celebrate on Yom Tov, mandates that one offer peace offerings in addition to the festive peace offering. These are called the festive celebratory peace offerings. As the Torah says, you shall rejoice before Hashem, your Lord, and women are obligated in this mitzvah. So it means the person would actually bring a total of 3 offerings. 1 burnt offering, which could be a bird, 1 peace offering, and then 1 celebration peace offering. Nowadays, we'll see how we achieve these mitzvahs a little further on. According to scriptural law, the Torah itself, there are no fixed measures with regards to the sacrifices brought when appearing before Hashem or the festive offerings. As the Torah says, each person according to what he gives. We say this in the Musaf prayer on Yom Tov. Ish kamat nas yodoi kirvikas Hashem aleikech. Each person according to what his hands give, according to the blessing of Hashem. However, according to rabbinic law, limits were established. One should not bring a burnt offering to make one's appearance worth less than a silver bar, nor should one bring a festive peace offering worth less than 2 silver bar. Not sure the exact value of that. It is a mitzvah to bring these sacrifices proportionate to one's wealth, as implied by the phrase, according to what one gives. It's missing the end of the verse, which is most important. It says, each according to what his hand gives, based on the blessing that Hashem has given you. Which means what your hand gives, I don't know why the Rambam only quotes this part of the pasuk, without even saying etc. But the conclusion of that pasuk is that we should give according to what we've been given. I just heard of a story. There was a particular tenant in California, and his landlord increased the rent, and he couldn't pay. He was struggling. He was really in a tough situation. And as much as he tried to appeal to the landlord, there was nothing, no room for any leeway. And this particular person's rabbi approached a rabbi from California whose name was Rabbi Shimon Reichik, a special rabbi who actually taught me when I was, before I got married. And Rabbi Reichik said, okay, let's go and meet this particular landlord. And the 2 of them went to meet the landlord. And Rabbi Reichik said to the landlord that I understand that you're in tough times. Like, I'm sorry to hear you're in such tough times that you're obviously not in a position to give any of your tenants a break, even if they're in desperate situations. So, I don't want your tough times they don't need to be overlooked. So I'm willing, I could go out there and I'm happy to try to fundraise for you to cover, so you could put bread on your table. And that way you won't need to go through that awful experience of having to raise the rent of somebody that can't afford it. The rabbi looked up the landlord looked up at Rabbi Reichik. He said, Rabbi, don't worry, we won't bother the tenants. And so it was for a long time. The tenant was able to continue paying what he was paying until he was able to reestablish himself. So whatever we give should be according to what we have, no less. And that certainly applies to Hashem as well. But when it comes to mitzvahs, we should be giving of our best, buying tefillin, mezuzahs, or any mitzvah, certainly the mitzvah of tzedakah. Now moving back to today's Rambam, the third mitzvah, which is to rejoice. I'll say just to not establish a minimum measure for the peace offering for rejoicing. When a person will ascend to Yerushalayim for the festival, if he is in possession of the sacrifices required when presenting oneself, he should bring them, or he should bring sufficient silver to purchase a sacrificial animal. If he does not possess silver, he should not bring articles of value equivalent to silver. Even if he is in possession of articles worth several gold pieces, It is forbidden for him to ascend to Jerusalem empty-handed without silver or sacrificial animals. So we don't want him walking with a whole, his whole backyard of all types of junk that he wants to sell to make money. Rather, he should come prepared, either with actual offerings or with money to purchase them, with actual silver themselves. Why was one forbidden to ascend while bringing articles with money? Perhaps he will not be able to sell them, or perhaps he will find impurities in the money he receives. If it's not actual tradable cash, then he might actually run short and not be able to bring the offerings that he is required to bring. One who did not offer the burnt offering marking his appearance and his festive peace offering on the first day of the festival. So if he didn't do so on the first day, he could do so on the remaining days. As the Torah says, for 7 days you shall celebrate unto Hashem your Lord. This teaches that all of these days are fit for offering festive sacrifices. They are all compensation for the first day. You know, where this gets quite interesting is when it comes to Shavuos. There's a lot of discussion about this because the festival of Shavuos in Israel is only 1 day. So when it comes to Pesach and Sukkot, so it says that he's got 7 days, they're all still Yom Tov. There's a lot of discussion. When exactly do we say that the obligation is on the first day and the remaining days are just time to make up? Or does that same obligation exist on the remaining days? And this would be relevant if somebody converted in the middle of Yom Tov in other scenarios. But as far as Shavuos, he can still bring the offerings even though Yom Tov is over, which is why some communities don't say Tachdun for several days after Shavuos. Back to the Rambam. It is a mitzvah to be early and to offer these sacrifices on the first day. Zrizin makdiva de mitzvahs. We rush to do mitzvahs. If either inadvertently or intentionally one did not offer them on the first day, they should be offered on the second day. Whoever delays is deserving of reproach. Concerning such a person is implied the words of censure, I will gather in and break those who delay the festive prayers and offerings. So we certainly do not want to be reprimanded with this severe critique for lazing around when it comes to our Yiddishkeit. If the festival passed without one bringing these festive offerings, he is not obligated to bring them afterwards. Concerning such a situation, the Torah says, a wrong that cannot be righted. And I remember hearing just an anecdote which was quite enlightening. And that was, the Shulchan Aruch speaks about if a person forgot to daven, what do you do? So if you forgot a particular prayer, you can make it up by the next prayer. You could actually do an extra Shemona Esrei, an extra Amidah, as you've all learned, to make up for the Amidah that was missed. But there are certain scenarios where you can't make it up. And so a person can have a perspective of, great, okay, no need to make it up. I'm just move forward. But there's actually a negative perspective to that, which is, oh no, I don't even have an opportunity to make it up. What does that mean? So we certainly don't want to be in a situation where we missed out on something and it's a mu'uva shelo yuchol l'saken. It's a wrong that cannot be righted. When one did not bring the festive sacrifices on the first day of the Sukkot holiday, he may bring them throughout the entire festival and on the final holiday, which is the 8th day. But even the 8th day can serve as compensation for the first. Although we're already moving on to Shmini Atzeres and Sukkot Torah, it's a separate Yom Tov, he still has time to compensate. Somebody who did not bring the festive offerings on the holiday of Shavuos may bring them for 7 days. He may compensate during the 6 days that follow the festival of Shavuos. This concept that the festival of Shavuos is similar to the festival of Pesach, regardless of compensation, was communicated part of the oral tradition, as I mentioned orally beforehand. Now, the burnt offering is brought when appearing before Hashem. That was the first of the 3 offerings, which we said it is built into appearing before Hashem. We said there could even be a bird. So, and the peace offerings do not supersede either the Shabbos prohibitions or the restrictions against ritual impurity. Why? Because there's no fixed time when they are required to be brought, like the communal offerings. But if one does not bring his festive offerings on 1 day, he may bring them on the next day. So remember earlier I said there's a big discussion about, do we say that the time is the first day and the remaining days are compensation? Or do we say that all 7 days are its time? So these words of the Rambam imply that actually all 7 days are its time. But still you should bring it on the first day. And since that is the case, they would not override Shabbos. They do, however, supersede the prohibitions of the holidays. Although sacrifices which one has vowed or pledged to bring are not offered on Yom Tov, so if bringing an offering means breaking Yom Tov, so if that offering is for Yom Tov and it needs to be brought on that day, so then that's not breaking Yom Tov, it's adding. If it's a private offering that a person made, it's just nothing to do with Yom Tov, then that will need to wait. But the bread offerings offered when appearing before Hashem, the festive peace offerings and the celebration peace offerings are offered. And the reason is, they are not vows or pleasures, but rather obligations of the Yom Tov. So it's not something that can be postponed. When one brings the burnt offerings brought when appearing before Hashem, or the festive peace offerings, and the third type of offering, the celebration peace offering on the Yom Tov, he should lean on them with all his power, as he does when bringing offerings on other days. This is called smicha, not the smicha that makes you a rabbi, but one of the steps in bringing an offering would actually be to weigh down on the animal. The reason for this, or the spiritual significance, unfortunately I cannot tell you, but this is part of the mitzvah. Even though leading on the animal is not an indispensable element of the sacrifice, which means that if he didn't do it, the mitzvah will still be accomplished, as we explained. The sages did not institute a decree forbidding this as shvus. Although usually an animal is muktzah on Shabbos, you're not allowed to move an animal on Shabbos or make it move by hand. Nonetheless, muktzah is something that was instituted by the sages, and muktzah does not apply where part of the mitzvah of the Kabbalah is to lead on the animal. That would be done as any other day. When a person sets aside a burnt offering brought when appearing before Hashem, and then he died, so his descendants are obligated to offer it once it's already been set aside. It is permitted to offer sacrifices which one has vowed or pledged during the intermediate days of a holiday. So although you can't bring it on the Yom Tov itself, because then you're not allowed to do any work, you are allowed to bring it on Chalabayid, even though also Chalabayid we don't do work, but obviously it's not as serious. You are allowed to drive, for example, in Chalabayid. Similarly, you would be able to bring your voluntary offerings. As the Torah says, you will offer these to Hashem on your festivals, aside from your vowed and pledged offerings. So we see clearly that the vowed and pledged offerings, other offerings that a person pledged, are also brought on Yom Tov, or not on Yom Tov itself, but on the intermediary days of Chalabayid. Now that verse continues, for your burnt offerings, your meal offerings, your peace offerings. For your burnt offerings includes a burnt offering brought by a person with saras, which again is a private offering, and a woman after childbirth. Your meal offerings would include the meal offerings brought by a sinner, and the meal offerings brought by a woman whose husband accused her of adultery, part of the Saita episode. And your peace offerings includes the peace offering brought by a Nazir, who's vowed for having wine. Part of the process of the Nazir is where he brings a peace offering. All of these are offered at Chalabayid, on the in-between days of your, between the first and last days of Yom Tov, but not on the days where it's full Yom Tov itself. Now, when a person who ascended to Yerushalayim for a pilgrimage festival, which we said are Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos, had many members of his household to partake of the offerings. So he had a lot of people, but Parnasa was tough. He had limited means. So he should bring many festive peace offerings and few burnt offerings brought when appearing before Hashem. Why? He's got a lot of people to feed. So therefore, he should rather bring more animals which are actually eaten than the burnt offerings which are not eaten by people, rather just eaten by the altar, just burnt to the altar. If he has few members of his household to partake of the offerings, but ample means, so he has lots to give and doesn't need much, so you should bring many burnt offerings brought when appearing before Hashem and few peace offerings, because he doesn't need to eat them. They could be eaten by the Mizbeach, by the altar. If he has few of both, concerning that, our sages said one should not bring less than a ba'ah for a burnt offering and 2 silver ba'ah for a peace offering, as we mentioned earlier, the minimum requirements. If he was blessed amply with both, concerning this, our sages applied the verse, according to the blessing of God, your Lord, which he has granted you. And here we have the end of that verse, which the Rambam did not mention earlier, as we said in the Musaf prayer. Ish kabatnas yada kibekas Hashem Elokecha Asher Sadlach, based on the blessing which Hashem has given you. Thank you so much for joining. And now for the quiz. and then we'll take questions. Which of the 3 mitzvahs associated with the festivals are women commanded in? Appearing before Hashem, celebrating, or bringing a festive offering? This is a little tricky, the order that they put them in.
Celebrating.
I think celebrating.
Celebrating. The Rambam didn't mention this now, but in modern terms, we all still have a mitzvah, obviously do have a mitzvah to celebrate on Yom Tov, and men celebrate Yom Tov primarily through good kosher meat and kosher wines, and women celebrate by their husbands buying them jewelry, or at least shoes. So certainly part of the mitzvah of Yom Tov, which we've already discussed elsewhere in the Rambam, is making sure that our wives have what to make them happy. One fulfills his obligation to appear before Hashem on the festivals by. So we say part of the mitzvah, the first of the 3 mitzvahs of appearing before Hashem, is to be in the temple courtyard on the first day of the festival and bring a burnt offering from a domesticated animal or a fowl. To be in the temple courtyard on any day of the festival and bring a burnt offering from a domesticated animal or fowl. By being in the temple courtyard on the first day of the festival.
Number 1.
Well, let me put it to you like this. If a person only
Number
appears
two.
on any day of the festival, did he not fulfill the obligation?
Yeah, he
He's
does.
got the whole Yontif to fulfill the.
So I think it's 1 or 2.
I would go for,
If you were right.
yeah.
Okay.
But I agree
I
with
mean, he
you.
said it doesn't override Shabbos, but maybe what that means is maybe appearing should be specifically on day 1 and the offering can be brought on the days that follow. I'm not sure. I'd definitely like to look it up some more. But it goes back to what we discussed originally, is it that the mitzvah is the first day and the rest of the days are just to make it up, or do we say the mitzvah is all 7 days? If one did not bring his festive sacrifice on the first day of the festival, may he bring them on the other days.
Yes. Yes.
That's obvious. And finally, if one descends to Yerushalayim for the festival with a large family and limited funds, what should he do? He should bring an equal amount of burnt offerings and sin offerings, according to what he can afford. He should bring more peace offerings and less burnt offerings, or he should bring more burnt offerings and less peace offerings.
Number 2.
Correct. That way he could actually feed his family with those offerings. Thank you so much. Oh, we have another question? No. Thank you so much for joining.